The crew of the Andromeda Dawn had been traveling for over 6 months. Their mission simple: explore Proxima Centauri, Earth's closest potential habitable exoplanet. But as they neared the planet's orbit, something unexpected happened. It started with a signal, a strange rhythmic pulse that didn't match any known pattern. The ship's communication officer, Lieutenant Carlos Moreno, had been the first to notice it. At first, he thought it was interference from the star itself, but after running a few scans, he realized this was something far more complex. "Captain, you need to see this," Carlos said, his voice tight with a mixture of excitement and concern. Captain Alina Hughes came rushing to the bridge, her eyes narrowing as she saw the data. The signal wasn't random. It was a message, one that seemed to be repeating itself over and over. But it wasn't in any language they knew. Alina turned to Dr. Leah Sandoval, the ship's linguist. "This is your area of expertise, Leah," she said, her voice steady but tense. "Can you figure it out?" Leah, who had spent her life studying alien languages and communication methods, leaned in, her eyes scanning the symbols on the screen. They were unlike anything she'd seen before, curved, organic shapes that almost seemed to pulse with life. Her mind raced. "It's a pattern. A language, but not one I've ever encountered," Leah replied, a hint of frustration in her voice. "I'll need more time to decode it, but I'm sure this is no accident." Before she could continue, the ship's sensors pinged again. This time, the data wasn't just strange. It was overwhelming. A massive alien vessel, unlike anything humans had ever built, appeared in their path. It was enormous, its shape both sleek and terrifying, with strange lights flickering across its surface, and it was headed straight for them. Captain Hughes immediately ordered evasive maneuvers, but the alien ship didn't change course. It seemed to know exactly where the Andromeda Dawn was headed. The crew held their breath as the ship loomed larger, the tension thick in the air. What did they want? Were they hostile? And then, as if to answer their question, a voice echoed through the ship's communication system. It wasn't in any language they understood, but somehow it was clear. A deep, powerful voice that seemed to fill the entire bridge. "This is your last chance," the voice said, its tone cold and unforgiving. "You have one solar cycle to prove your worth, or be erased from existence." Leah's heart skipped a beat. She turned to look at Captain Hughes, who stood frozen, staring at the alien ship on the screen. This was no ordinary encounter. This was a test, one they didn't understand, but one that could decide the fate of humanity. The crew exchanged worried glances. They had never faced anything like this before, and now they had to figure out how to prove humanity's worth to an alien species that seemed so much older, so much more advanced. With the alien ship hovering above them, and the weight of their mission pressing down on them, Leah realized one thing: Earth's survival might depend on her ability to decipher what came next. The days following the alien encounter were filled with tension. The Andromeda Dawn hovered in orbit around Proxima Centauri, waiting for any further communication from the mysterious alien ship. The crew was on edge, unsure of what to do next. Dr. Leah Sandoval sat in her small lab, the walls lined with screens displaying strange symbols and patterns. The alien message was still fresh in her mind. "This is your last chance." What did it mean? Was this an invasion? Or was it some kind of test? Captain Alina Hughes had called for a meeting in the command center. The entire crew gathered around the large circular table, their faces pale from the stress and confusion. Leah was still processing everything. She had spent her life studying alien languages, but this was unlike anything she had ever encountered. "I've been going over the symbols," Leah began, speaking to the crew. "I don't have a full translation yet, but I believe this is some kind of challenge, not a threat." She paused, looking around the room, trying to read the faces of her colleagues. "The alien ship, it's watching us, but I think they want to see if we're worthy." The room fell silent. The word "worthy" seemed so simple, yet so heavy. Worthy of what? What did these aliens want from humanity? Captain Hughes was the first to speak. "We have one solar cycle to prove ourselves," she said, her voice steady but filled with concern. "What if we fail? What happens then?" Leah took a deep breath. "I don't know," she admitted. "But whatever it is, it's clear that this isn't a simple matter of technology or power. The test will be more complex." The crew began discussing the possibilities. Could the test be about science, diplomacy, creativity? Leah's mind raced. The aliens hadn't attacked. They hadn't demanded anything. They had simply issued a challenge. But what kind of challenge? It wasn't long before the alien ship sent a new message. This time, it was a data packet. As Leah and her team began analyzing it, they found it filled with intricate puzzles, strange formulas, and cryptic instructions. Some of the puzzles involved deep knowledge of physics, others of mathematics, and still others required the ability to think in ways that humans had never been taught. "This is impossible," muttered Lieutenant Carlos Moreno as he looked at one of the more complicated problems on his screen. The equations seemed to stretch on forever, defying any simple solution. But Leah's eyes glimmered with determination. "It's not impossible. It's a test of our ability to adapt, to think outside the box. We need to approach this from all angles." The crew worked around the clock, each member contributing their skills. Scientists, engineers, diplomats. They all played their part in deciphering the alien challenges. But as time passed, the pressure mounted. Every answer they provided was met with another set of increasingly difficult tasks, and the clock was ticking. As Leah sat in her lab, staring at the screens, she couldn't shake the feeling that this test was something deeper. The aliens wanted to know if humanity could come together, could rise to the occasion. They weren't just testing their intellect, they were testing their hearts. One night, as Leah worked alone, a thought struck her. What if this was about more than just solving puzzles? What if it was about showing the aliens the very thing that made humans unique, their ability to hope, to dream, and to never give up? Leah stood up, her mind racing. She wasn't just solving problems. She was proving that humanity would not go down without a fight, without trying to understand and grow. And she would make sure the aliens saw that, no matter how impossible the test seemed. As the days passed, the Andromeda Dawn became a hive of activity. The alien challenges had only grown more difficult, and the pressure was mounting. But the tension inside the ship wasn't just about the puzzles and the tests. It was about something else, something far more dangerous. While Leah and the rest of the crew worked tirelessly to decode the alien messages, not everyone on Earth agreed with the mission's approach. Some governments, particularly those with military influence, began to push for more aggressive action. The message from the alien queen had been clear: prove your worth or be erased. But what if the aliens couldn't be trusted? What if they were lying? And the only way to survive was to fight back. On Earth, political leaders and military commanders were divided. Some wanted to engage in diplomacy, while others believed humanity needed to strike first before the aliens could attack. As tension spread across the globe, it reached the Andromeda Dawn. Late one evening, Captain Alina Hughes received an urgent message from Earth's military leadership. "We've sent orders," the voice on the screen said. "We're deploying a fleet to stand by. If the aliens make any aggressive moves, we will retaliate." Alina's heart sank. The crew had spent so much time trying to prove humanity's worth through intellect and diplomacy, but now there was a chance that a war could break out, one that could destroy everything they had worked for. A war between humans and the alien empire, based on fear and mistrust. "I don't want to fight them," Alina said, her voice shaking slightly. "But if the world decides this is a war, what choice do we have?" Leah, who had been sitting in the background, watching the conversation unfold, stepped forward. "Captain, we can't let fear control us. We don't know what the aliens want, but we know they've given us a chance. Fighting them now would waste everything we've worked for. But Elena was caught in a tough spot. The Andromeda Dawn was in a delicate position, orbiting a planet under the watch of an alien species that had already shown they were more advanced than humanity. Any wrong move, any misstep, could mean the end for Earth. "I can't stop the military from acting," Elena said, her eyes filled with uncertainty. "We're too far from Earth to control the situation. I don't even know if we can trust the aliens." Leah understood the captain's dilemma, but she couldn't let the situation spiral out of control. "We need to show them we're different," Leah insisted. "We have something the aliens don't understand. We have the ability to unite, to cooperate, and to adapt. If we fight, we lose that." The next day, Elena called for a meeting with the crew. "We've been given a unique opportunity. The aliens have challenged us, but we've only been focusing on their tests. It's time to show them something else. We have to prove that we can come together. Humanity, all of us." But even as Elena spoke, a shadow of doubt lingered. The military fleet was getting closer, and there were whispers among the crew. Some questioned whether diplomacy alone could save them. Others feared that, no matter how hard they tried, the alien queen might have already made up her mind about humanity's fate. Leah knew one thing for sure. If Earth went to war now, everything they had worked for would be destroyed. They had to stay united, stay focused on what made them human. Their ability to solve problems, to dream, and to find hope even when things seemed impossible. But as the military fleet prepared to launch, Leah couldn't shake the feeling that the true test was only just beginning. The tension aboard the Andromeda Dawn reached new heights. While political leaders on Earth pushed for military action, Captain Elena Hughes clung to the hope that diplomacy could still prevail. The alien ship remained silent for days, watching them from orbit, but there was no sign of aggression. Just the weight of their challenge hanging over the crew. Dr. Leah Sandoval had been working tirelessly to decode the strange symbols and puzzles from the alien message, but progress was slow. The puzzles grew more complex with each transmission, and time was running out. The Queen's ultimatum had been clear: one solar cycle. Prove your worth, or be erased. But despite the growing pressure, Leah refused to give in to despair. The key to solving this mystery, she believed, wasn't just about solving the puzzles. It was about understanding the alien way of thinking. The tests they faced were unlike anything humans had encountered before, but Leah felt a flicker of hope. There was something about the way the aliens presented their challenges. It wasn't just about intelligence or raw power. It was about something deeper, something humanity could offer that the aliens couldn't understand yet. One evening, as Leah sat alone in her lab, trying to decipher yet another complex equation, her console blinked. A new message arrived from the alien ship. This time, however, it wasn't just a cryptic puzzle. The message was accompanied by a voice, a deep, almost melodic sound that reverberated through the ship's communication system. "This is the voice of the Queen," the voice said. "You have done well so far, human. But this next task will test you in ways you cannot yet imagine. Listen carefully." Leah's heart raced as she listened intently. The voice spoke slowly, deliberately, in perfect English, though there was something foreign about its cadence, as if the language itself had been altered somehow. "We know you are trying to understand us," the Queen continued, "but it is not enough to simply solve our puzzles. You must show us that you can think beyond your limitations. You must prove you are capable of change, of growth. Only then will we consider your survival." Leah frowned. This wasn't just a test of intelligence. It was a test of humanity itself. The Queen wasn't asking them to be perfect. She was asking them to grow, to rise above their flaws. But could humanity do that in time? Then, to Leah's surprise, the voice shifted. The tone softened, and there was a hint of something else, something that almost sounded like hope. "We have seen your efforts," the Queen said, "but you are still young. Your species is full of potential, yes, but also fear, pride, and doubt. You have one more chance, human. We will grant you this opportunity, but you must choose wisely." Leah's mind spun. What did this mean? Was the Queen offering them a way out? Or was this just another part of the test? The aliens had been watching them closely, analyzing every move, every decision. But Leah had the unsettling feeling that the Queen was not just testing humanity. She was also watching them closely, looking for something that would tip the balance in their favor. Leah turned to Captain Hughes, who was standing nearby, watching her closely. "It's not just about solving puzzles anymore," Leah said, her voice quiet but urgent. "The Queen wants to see if we can grow, if we can adapt. She's looking for something deeper than intelligence. She's looking for our potential." Captain Hughes looked at her, her brow furrowed. "And what if we fail? What happens then?" Leah took a deep breath. "I don't know, but we can't give up now. We have to prove that we can change, that we're worth saving." The days after the alien message felt like a dream and a nightmare woven together. The Queen had granted them a chance, but what did that really mean? The crew of the Andromeda Dawn continued to work around the clock, solving increasingly difficult puzzles. But each success was met with more complex tasks, and every task carried a sense of urgency. Time was slipping away. Dr. Leah Sandoval had spent countless hours trying to find patterns in the alien challenges. Some of the tests seemed to test the crew's knowledge of advanced science and mathematics. Others pushed the boundaries of what was possible with human creativity and empathy. The aliens weren't just testing their intellect, they were testing their hearts. One evening, Leah found herself in the quiet of her lab, staring at a new challenge sent by the alien ship. It was another equation, but this one was different. It wasn't just complicated, it was contradictory. At first glance, it seemed like there was no possible solution, as if the numbers didn't add up. Leah rubbed her temples, feeling the weight of the task pressing down on her. Then, something clicked. She had been so focused on finding the perfect solution that she hadn't considered another possibility. This wasn't about finding the right answer. It was about seeing things differently, about breaking free from her own limitations. Leah's hands flew over the keyboard as she began to rewrite the equation, changing variables, rearranging components. After several moments of tense silence, the equation finally shifted into a form that made sense. It was a breakthrough, but not just in terms of the puzzle. Leah sat back in her chair, staring at the screen. It was as if she had looked into a broken mirror and, for a fleeting moment, seen something new. She understood now what the aliens were truly testing. It wasn't just about solving problems. It was about the ability to break free from rigid thinking, to look beyond the familiar and find new possibilities. It was a test of humanity's potential to adapt. Leah's heart raced. The test had changed. What had once been a puzzle to solve was now a reflection of humanity's own flaws and strengths. She stood up, heading toward the command center. When she arrived, she found Captain Alina Hughes and the rest of the crew gathered around the table. Everyone was exhausted, their faces drawn and tired, but there was a new sense of urgency in the air. "I think I understand the test now," Leah said, her voice steady but filled with excitement. "It's not just about intellect. It's about growth. The Queen wants to see if we can adapt, if we can think in ways that break our old patterns. We've been approaching everything with logic, but what if that's not enough?" Alina looked at her with a mix of confusion and curiosity. "So, what do we do now?" Leah paused, considering the weight of her words. "We need to show the aliens that we can change, not just in the way we think, but in the way we act. It's not enough to simply answer their questions. We need to prove that we can be more than we are, that we can grow in ways they never expected." Captain Hughes nodded slowly, a sense of resolve filling her eyes. "All right then, we do this. Together." The crew began to work in a new way, more collaborative, more open to unconventional ideas. They focused not just on the answers, but on the journey of discovery. The challenges remained difficult, but with each one, the crew began to think differently, to move past their old boundaries. They were no longer just solving problems. They were learning how to think in a new way. And that, they hoped, was exactly what the Queen wanted to see. As the Andromeda Dawn sailed through the silent void of space, Leah couldn't help but wonder if this was the turning point. Had humanity finally begun to understand the true nature of the challenge? Or was there something else lurking in the depths of the alien tests, waiting to be revealed? The days seemed to blur together. The Andromeda Dawn continued to orbit Proxima Centauri, surrounded by the alien ship that hovered like an ever-present reminder of their test. Tensions ran high as the crew worked together, attempting to prove humanity's worth in ways they never thought possible. But just beneath the surface, something dark was beginning to stir. It started with whispers. Some of the crew members were beginning to question the entire mission. Leah had noticed the change in mood among certain officers, particularly those with military backgrounds. While most of the team remained focused on solving the alien puzzles and embracing the challenge, others were beginning to feel that the aliens' tests were a distraction. What if they had been given an impossible task on purpose? What if the Queen didn't want humanity to succeed at all? The thought that the aliens might be testing them just to watch them fail was one Leah couldn't ignore. And yet she knew that wasn't the whole truth. The Queen had given them a chance to prove themselves, not by brute force, but by adapting, by showing humanity's potential. But it was clear that not everyone shared Leah's faith in the Queen's motives. One evening, while Leah was reviewing the latest message from the alien ship, Lieutenant Carlos Moreno approached her in the lab. His face was tight, his eyes darkened with frustration. "I don't trust them, Leah," Carlos said, his voice low but firm. "The longer we stay here, the more I think we're just playing into their hands. They've been testing us for days, and what do we have to show for it? Nothing but empty promises and riddles." Leah frowned. "Carlos, we don't know everything about their motives, but we've been given a chance. We can't throw that away because of fear. The Queen has been watching us closely, and I believe she wants to see if we're capable of growth. This isn't just about winning. It's about proving we're more than we've been." Carlos shook his head, disbelief in his eyes. "That's exactly what I'm talking about. You're putting too much trust in her. What if she's just playing with us? What if there's no real test at all? What if we're just a game to her?" Leah paused, considering his words. She wanted to argue, to convince him that humanity had to rise above its own doubts. But she knew something was wrong. There was a crack in the unity of the crew, a sense of growing distrust that threatened to tear them apart. Carlos wasn't the only one feeling this way. As the days passed, more of the crew started to question the mission's true purpose. Some began to talk about sabotage, whispering about how they could hijack the ship, disable the alien tests, and force humanity's hand before it was too late. The idea of rebellion, of breaking away from the Queen's challenge, spread like a virus through the ranks. It wasn't long before Lieutenant Colonel James Carter, a high-ranking military officer aboard the ship, began to openly discuss his plans. He suggested they should be preparing for war, just in case the aliens were setting them up for destruction. Lee had overheard parts of the conversation while walking through the hallways. Carter was trying to rally a group of officers, arguing that humanity needed to take control of its own fate, not wait for the alien Queen to decide. It wasn't just talk anymore. A plan was forming, one that could tear the Andromeda Dawn apart from the inside. Leah felt the weight of the situation. She knew she had to do something before it was too late. The crew needed to come together, not fracture under the pressure. They couldn't let fear and distrust lead them into making a terrible mistake. She rushed to Captain Alina Hughes's quarters, her heart pounding in her chest. As she entered, she found Alina staring at the ship's view screen, watching the alien vessel in the distance. The Queen's ship, still silent, still watching. "We have a problem," Leah said, urgency in her voice. Alina turned, concern flashing in her eyes. "What is it?" "The crew? They're starting to turn against the mission. Some of them are talking about rebellion, about sabotaging the tests. They think we're being set up for failure." Captain Hughes's face hardened, and she stood up, her posture stiff. "We can't let that happen. If we lose the crew's trust, we lose everything. Leah nodded, determination settling in. We need to remind them what we're fighting for. It's not just about the tests. It's about showing that humanity has the strength to face the unknown and grow. If we break now, we won't just lose the Queen's test. We'll lose ourselves. Captain Hughes looked at her for a long moment, as if weighing her words. Then, with a decisive nod, she said, "All right. Let's gather the crew. We need to remind them who we are." Leah's heart lifted slightly, but she knew the battle for the crew's unity had only just begun. The atmosphere aboard the Andromeda Dawn had shifted. The unity that had once bound the crew together was now fraying at the edges. Tensions simmered just beneath the surface, and the threat of a fracture was more real than ever. Captain Alina Hughes knew the time had come to act. The ship's command center had been filled with hushed whispers, as Leah had warned the captain about the growing unrest. There was talk of rebellion, sabotage, and worst of all, distrust. Some of the crew believed the alien queen's tests were a trap. Others saw them as a waste of time. And a few were ready to take matters into their own hands. If they couldn't trust the queen, they would act without her approval. That would be the only way to ensure humanity's survival. But Alina wasn't ready to give up. She couldn't let the fear and frustration tear them apart. The queen had given them a chance, but it was more than just a test. It was a challenge to the very core of who they were. If they broke now, if they gave in to fear and suspicion, they would never be the species capable of surviving in the vast unknown of space. Alina knew the crew was at a breaking point, and it was up to her to keep them from breaking completely. That afternoon, Alina called a ship-wide meeting. She wanted to address the growing division head-on. As the crew assembled in the command center, the weight of the moment pressed down on everyone. The room was filled with faces, some tired, some frustrated, some fearful. There were quiet murmurs, as if the air itself was thick with doubt. Alina stood at the front, her gaze scanning the room. She had to reach them all, especially the ones who were beginning to question everything. "I know what's happening," she began, her voice steady but filled with the gravity of the situation. "I know that many of you are afraid, that you're beginning to doubt the mission. I understand. This is not easy, and the tests the aliens have set before us are not something we've ever faced. But I need you to listen carefully. This is not just about solving puzzles or passing their tests. This is about proving something much bigger. It's about showing who we are." She paused, letting her words sink in. Humanity is full of flaws, yes. We make mistakes, we fail, but we also rise. We adapt. We learn. The Queen isn't testing our ability to be perfect. She's testing our ability to grow, to change. And that's why we can't give up now. We are more than just a collection of individuals. We are a species capable of greatness, but only if we stand together. The room was silent as Alina's words hung in the air. Some faces softened, others remained hardened with doubt. But Alina could see a flicker of hope in their eyes, a spark that hadn't been there before. They weren't lost yet. Lieutenant Colonel James Carter, who had been one of the most vocal critics of the mission, stood up. His face was tense, but there was a trace of uncertainty in his eyes. "And what if she's just playing with us? What if she's waiting for us to fail so she can destroy us? You can't ignore the fact that she's testing us in ways we don't fully understand." Alina met his gaze, unflinching. "You're right, Carter. We don't understand everything. But we can't let that paralyze us. The Queen may be testing us, but she's also giving us a chance to prove ourselves. We can't throw that away just because it's hard. If we break now, if we let fear take over, we lose." There was a long silence as the crew processed her words. Then, slowly, Carlos Moreno stood up. He had been one of the first to suggest rebellion, but now his voice was calmer. "You're asking us to trust the Queen, even when we don't know if we can. It's hard, Captain, but maybe you're right. Maybe we can't let fear control us." A murmur of agreement rippled through the room. It wasn't much, but it was enough to shift the balance. The crew wasn't all on the same page yet, But Alina could see the cracks in their fear starting to heal. They were still uncertain, but there was a flicker of hope, a tiny ember of unity. "We're not perfect," Alina continued, her voice softening. "But that's what makes us human. We have the ability to change, to learn, to grow. And that's exactly what the Queen wants to see. Not perfection, growth. And that's something we can do, together." As the meeting drew to a close, the mood had shifted, just slightly, but enough to make a difference. The crew wasn't fully united yet, but they were beginning to remember who they were, what they were fighting for. And that, Alina knew, was the first step in the right direction. The Andromeda Dawn drifted in space, surrounded by the quiet, unblinking gaze of the alien ship. For the first time in days, the crew felt a sense of calm, though fragile, after Captain Alina Hugh's speech. The seeds of unity had been planted, but whether they would grow into something stronger remained uncertain. Still, the crew was willing to try. They had to. Leah Sandoval returned to her lab, determined to focus on the next challenge. She'd spent the last few days helping to calm the crew, but her mind kept circling back to the alien tests. The puzzles were growing more complex, but Lee had a feeling that they were close to understanding the deeper meaning of it all. The Queen wanted them to change, to evolve. But what did that look like in practical terms? Could they really grow beyond their human limitations? Leah sat down at her console, reviewing the latest data sent by the alien ship. The equation in front of her was unlike any she had seen before, an intricate series of symbols and calculations that seemed almost impossible to decipher. But Leah's mind felt clearer now, the fog of doubt lifting slightly. She had spent so much time focusing on the puzzle's surface, but maybe it was time to look at things differently. She closed her eyes for a moment, taking a deep breath. Then, slowly, she began to approach the equation in a new way, not as a problem to be solved, but as a question to be explored. What if the solution didn't lie in a single answer? What if the test was asking them to consider multiple possibilities, to embrace uncertainty instead of fearing it? Leah's fingers moved over the keys, transforming the equation as her mind began to open. The symbols started to make sense, not in the way she expected, but in a new light. Each calculation was a piece of a larger puzzle, not just about intelligence, but about adaptability. Humanity's greatest strength had always been its ability to change, to learn from mistakes, to see things from new perspectives. The answer emerged slowly, like the sun breaking through a clouded sky. It wasn't a single solution, but a series of interconnected possibilities. It was a glimpse of the kind of growth the Queen had been asking for. Leah's heart raced as she confirmed the solution, a sense of triumph sweeping through her. It wasn't perfect, but it was humanity's answer, imperfect, yet capable of change. With a deep breath, Leah sent the solution to Captain Alina Hughes. She didn't know if this was the breakthrough they had been waiting for, but she had a feeling it was. The alien Queen wasn't just testing their knowledge. She was testing their ability to break free from rigid thinking, to explore new possibilities. And that, Leah realized, was what made humanity unique. When Alina received Leah's message, she was sitting in her quarters, contemplating the path ahead. She knew the crew was still divided, and the pressure to succeed weighed heavily on her. But as she read Leah's solution, something shifted inside her. It wasn't just a mathematical answer. It was a sign that they were beginning to understand the true nature of the test. They weren't just solving puzzles. They were learning how to adapt, how to think in ways that stretched beyond their limitations. Alina stood up, her mind clearer now than it had been in days. She knew what she had to do. The crew needed to see this. They needed to understand that they weren't just solving problems. They were evolving. And that was the key to passing the test. She walked briskly to the ship's central communications hub and called for another meeting. This time, there would be no doubts, no hesitations. She would share what Leah had discovered, and they would move forward, united in their purpose. As the crew gathered in the command center, Alina stood before them, a sense of resolve in her eyes. "We've been given a chance," she said, her voice firm. The Queen has challenged us, not to prove we're perfect, but to show that we can change. Leah has found the answer to the latest test. It's not one solution. It's many. That's what the Queen is asking for. She wants to see if we can think in new ways. And we've done that. The crew listened intently as Elena continued. This is the moment we prove who we are. Not just as individuals, but as a species. We're not perfect, but we can grow. We can adapt. And that's what we need to show the Queen. The crew exchanged looks, some still uncertain, but others, a glimmer of hope in their eyes, were beginning to believe in what Elena was saying. This was their moment. The Andromeda Dawn wasn't just a ship. It was a symbol of humanity's potential, of the strength to evolve, to face the unknown with courage. Leah's solution wasn't the end of the test. It was the beginning. And this time, they were ready. The Andromeda Dawn glided through space, the alien ship still hovering nearby like a silent observer. The crew had begun to rally around Captain Elena Hughes's message of hope and unity, and the mood aboard the ship had shifted. There was still uncertainty, still fear, but now there was also a sense of purpose. They were no longer just solving puzzles. They were proving something bigger. They were showing the alien Queen that humanity could grow, adapt, and overcome. Leah Sandoval felt the weight of their progress as she stood in the command center, watching the stars drift by. The puzzle she had solved, the one that had revealed the aliens' deeper challenge, had sparked something in the crew. It wasn't just about intellect anymore. It was about humanity's ability to think differently, to embrace change and uncertainty. Leah had seen the signs. Some crew members were still unsure, but others had begun to believe that they could pass the Queen's test. But there was one question that remained. What would the Queen do next? The answer came sooner than expected. A sudden alert broke the silence of the command center. The alien ship was transmitting a new message. This time, it wasn't a riddle or puzzle. It was a direct communication, a command. This is your final test. The voice of the Queen echoed through the ship's speakers. You have shown growth, but now you must prove your will. Your next challenge will require more than intelligence. It will require sacrifice. The words sent a ripple of unease through the crew. The last part of the message seemed to hang in the air, heavy with meaning. Sacrifice. What did that mean? Leah's heart skipped a beat. She wasn't sure what the Queen was asking, but the sense of urgency in the alien's tone was unmistakable. They were close to the end of the test. The Queen had given them a chance to prove themselves, but now they were being asked to pay a price. Captain Hughes turned to the crew, her face grim but resolute. We need to be ready for whatever comes next. The Queen wants us to prove our will, but we cannot let fear make this decision for us. The crew gathered in the command center, their faces tense but determined. Lieutenant Colonel Carter, who had once advocated for rebellion, stood at the front, his posture straight. What do we do now, Captain? Elena took a deep breath. We trust each other. We face this final test together. Leah stepped forward, her mind racing. She had no idea what the test would be, but she knew it would push them to their limits. It wasn't just about intelligence anymore. It was about what they were willing to give up, what they were willing to sacrifice. It would be the ultimate test of their character. Captain, Leah said, her voice steady, we have to be prepared for anything. The Queen is looking for something beyond answers. She wants to see if we are capable of doing what's necessary, even if it's hard. Elena nodded. And we will. Together. The tension was palpable as the crew made preparations, their eyes glued to the view screen. They didn't know what the test would be, but they were ready. Whatever sacrifice the Queen required, they would face it. They had come this far. Now they had to finish what they started. As the Andromeda Dawn drifted closer to the alien ship, the crew braced themselves for whatever was to come. They had shown their ability to adapt, to grow, to change. But now, they would have to prove their courage. They would have to face the final test, not with fear, but with the strength that had made humanity resilient throughout history. It was no longer just about surviving the test. It was about proving that humanity could rise above its own limits. The Queen had given them a chance. Now, they had to prove they were worthy of it. The crew of the Andromeda Dawn stood together, facing the unknown. The Queen's final challenge hung over them like a shadow, and their hearts raced with anticipation. They had shown their ability to grow, to adapt, but now they were being asked to prove something even more. Sacrifice. What would that truly mean? Captain Alina Hughes stood at the front of the command center, her eyes focused on the view screen. The alien ship hovered ominously in the distance. They had no idea what the final test would be, but they knew one thing: it wasn't going to be easy. Leah Sandoval, the ship's lead scientist, stared at the screen as well, her mind running through possibilities. They had come so far, yet this last test could undo everything. The voice of the Queen rang out again through the ship's speakers, cold and commanding. You have proven your ability to change. Now, you must prove your resolve. You will face a choice. One of you must step forward and sacrifice something of great value. A life, a dream, or the future of your species. Choose wisely. A gasp swept through the crew. The weight of the Queen's words was unbearable. A sacrifice. One life, one future, or a dream. What could they possibly give up that would prove they were worthy? Leah felt her heart pounding in her chest. She could sense the fear in the room. No one spoke for a long moment. Everyone was trying to understand what the Queen was asking. The concept of sacrifice was not something that could be easily defined or understood, especially not when it came to the survival of the entire species. Finally, Alina broke the silence. We need to think about this carefully. What does the Queen mean by sacrifice? Is it a literal life, or is it something more abstract? Lieutenant Colonel Carter stepped forward. His voice was filled with uncertainty, but there was a fierce determination in his eyes. If the Queen wants one of us to give up something, we have to ask ourselves, what is humanity's greatest strength? Our will to survive, our intellect, or our compassion? Leah nodded, her mind racing. It's not just about what we're willing to give up. It's about why. If we choose to sacrifice something, it should be because it's for the good of the greater whole, not just for survival, but for the future of humanity. Alina's gaze hardened as she took a step toward the crew. I think we all know what we're fighting for. This mission isn't just about us. It's about the future of humanity. Whatever the Queen demands, we must remember what's truly important. The silence in the room was suffocating as everyone processed the enormity of what they were being asked to do. After a moment, Carlos Moreno spoke up. If we're truly being tested, then maybe the sacrifice isn't about one of us giving up something. Maybe it's about our willingness to put the whole of humanity above individual desires. Maybe the Queen wants to see if we can choose the collective over the personal. The crew stood, eyes locked on one another. What was the right choice? The idea of sacrificing a life was unimaginable. But was it the right kind of test? Or was the Queen asking for something else, something even more difficult? After what felt like an eternity, Alina made her decision. She turned to face the crew with a calm that only came from deep conviction. We will not choose one person to sacrifice. We will choose to give up the one thing that makes us human. Our fear of the unknown, our fear of the cost of progress. We will show the Queen that we are willing to rise above that fear, no matter the price. Leah felt the weight of Alina's words, and she knew deep in her heart that the captain was right. The Queen wasn't asking for a life. She was asking for something more. The courage to step into the unknown and face the challenge without fear. That was the true test. The crew nodded in agreement, a unified force of will standing together. They had faced many challenges, but none like this. It wasn't just about surviving. It was about transcending fear and showing that humanity could rise above its own limitations. The voice of the Queen returned, soft yet full of power. You have passed. You have chosen to rise above fear, above doubt. You have proven that humanity is worthy of its place in the universe. As the crew stood together, a sense of relief and pride washed over them. They had passed the test, not through brute strength or intellect, but through the strength of their will. Humanity had shown that it was capable of growth, change, and sacrifice. And as the alien ship silently moved away, the Andromeda Dawn sailed forward, a symbol of what humanity could accomplish when it dared to face the unknown, together.